This is the Kestrel Country Podcast, where we discuss the people, places, and events all around Kestrel Country. Well, thanks for jumping on the podcast, guys.
Well, it's
like a regular old, like a Wednesday meeting or something.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All of us
a calm
sitting
conversation
around
amongst friends.
Exactly.
Yeah, peers. Yeah.
Kestrel
Yeah.
guys. The Kestrel guys minus Jed. He's
Yeah,
probably
he
out pouring concrete or doing something crazy.
Did I see him in a Forge video installing cabinetry? Was that the man in the green stuff?
No, that
I
wasn't
don't
Jed.
think so.
No? Okay. I thought he went over to help him. I'm like, this guy's magnanimous. His reputation for being helpful is spread throughout the Palouse.
It's true.
He's a capable guy in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just Jed. Not just Jed.
There you go.
Not just Jed looking for sheds
Yeah.
out in the woods.
Jed looking for sheds.
Jed looking for sheds.
Yeah. So, real estate. It's kind of our thing over
that's
here.
our sweet spot anyway, right?
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about this last year, 2023, and then now that we're officially in February, it's not even a new year anymore. We're
well
the end
into
of
the
February.
first quarter.
Yeah, so we got a little bit of 2024 under our belts, but then I think it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on where 2024 might be headed, real estate wise. So, first off, last year. I'll start the conversation with some stats. I was pulling up some information from the MLS. So year-to-year comparison from 2023 to 2022. So looking at what was last year, not surprisingly, volume down quite a bit across Moscow, Latah County. One thing I found interesting was that volume was a lot further down percentage-wise in the county versus the city of Moscow. So the more rural areas actually saw, there always is less volume, but they saw a bigger drop in volume. So if you're looking at residential sales in Moscow, they were down 6% in the city and down 24% in the county. In Latah County. With averaged out then at 13%. Pretty significant.
Yeah.
Really pretty significant drop in overall sales volume last year.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, looking at the Latah County numbers versus Moscow numbers, it's very, very obvious, at least to me, that Moscow remains the sweet spot inside the county.
Yeah.
I mean, there's far more buyers interested in single-family homes, even with acreage in Moscow, within the city limits
Right.
of Moscow and the surrounding area of Moscow, than they are in other places in Latah County. Because people, especially here from my perspective, think very town-bound about commutes. Like a 15-minute commute from outside of town is almost... like it sounds to me when I discuss location with clients, it seems like it's a big deal to them. Wherein if you're coming from other areas, it's normal to have 15, 20-minute commutes to go anywhere.
Right.
So I don't know what.
So what
why
do
that is.
what is your take on why volume was down so much last year?
Oh, absolutely, interest rates. Interest rates. I think the lowest interest rates were somewhere in October, and they just kind of peaked out somewhere in late. Was it late May or June? I can't
When they
remember.
got to their height?
Yeah,
No, it was October.
it was October.
Yeah. So they went up and up. They dropped a little bit, kind of like this time a year ago. Into February, they started dropping a little bit. We saw a little bit lower rates coming
Right.
into the spring. But then really basically they did what they did the previous year in 2022, which was started going up in the summer and really peaked in the fall.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I saw an article, I think it was Wall Street Journal a couple weeks ago, that last year sales volume nationally was somewhat similar, a little bit more extreme, but what is the lowest it had been, or the biggest drop anyway, in like 20 years.
Yeah, it actually was 28 years.
28 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're talking almost 3 decades worth of data showing that. And I definitely think it was the fact that interest rates are so high. I saw, buying power at 1.5 of interest rates, and people's shop payment is somewhere in the neighborhood of $300, between 283 and 325, depending on size of mortgage. And so that's really hard for people to swallow when they're budgeting out and they're thinking in terms of, do I make this move?
Yeah.
And inventory had everything to do with it as well.
Yeah.
With people that had refied right up through like even 5.5%, 6%, but between like high 2s and 3% and up to like 5.5%, it makes it hard for them to consider saying bye-bye to that mortgage interest rate to go on and saddle themselves or put themselves in a position of committing to a mortgage with a much higher interest rate, even knowing in the back of their minds, if they refi, they can do it again. When will we ever see 3% again?
Right.
Most economic data says probably not going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, I think inventory is the key. That there's, interest rates were really low and they're probably going to drop a little bit, but they're not going to drop that much. But the biggest factor is inventory. And I suspect that's true that with what happened in the rural markets too. It's just there was less inventory and, and when there's pressure on it, there's just nothing available really, nothing to look at kind of thing. And the new home construction is still expensive, so it's harder to develop lots. It's harder to split properties, that kind of thing. When you get out into rural areas, you've got wells, infrastructure issues, power, that kind of thing. So it's a difficult situation. And I would say last year you could say, yes, interest rates were a problem, but inventory has been an ongoing problem for a number of years. That's going to continue. It was true last year. It's probably going to continue this year to some degree. And people just have to get used to it and say, okay, now I got to figure out how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Save some money, get a better credit score, figure out how to buy down mortgage rates, maybe see if there's seller financing available.
Well, it's interesting.
All those kind of tools.
Interesting that you mentioned building costs and splits and that kind of thing, because if we move down to land, so residential was residential excluding vacant land, right? Move down to land, no change in the city of Moscow. So 33 lots were sold in 2023, 33 lots were sold in 2022. So no change in lots. However, outside of city limits, you go into Latah County and raw land was down 26% in terms of the volume, sales volume. So significant drop again outside of town. And I think there's a little bit of lack of inventory, but a lot of stuff actually just sat. And I think it's more to your point about, well, both of your points, but interest rates and also construction costs. There's just fewer people buying those raw land parcels last year and taking on a big building project like that.
We've had that conversation a couple of times, right, Mike, where we say, well, it is almost getting to the point now that with the cost of the land and then all of the build, like the dirt work, the roads, the septic, the well, price of material.
All the things that go into before you ever have any vertical construction. All those costs, putting in the road, putting in the well, bringing the power in, all those things are really expensive.
Yeah.
So
it kind of dampens the enthusiasm of people that are thinking about it. I've had 3 or 4 people last year that have actually kind of thrown their hands up in the air and said, it's not really, it's probably not economically viable for me to consider it.
Yeah, and then I think the overall economy affects that too, as well as inflation coming down. I think what we saw anecdotally, I saw a lot of in like 2021, 2022 was people buying land as a hedge against inflation, so to speak, or it was like, well, we've got some excess cash, let's just park it in land for the long term, that kind of thing. And I think that kind of dried up as well, and there was less of that kind of longer term speculative Idaho land grab kind of thing. But the before I get into prices, moving down to residential income, this one is not surprising. Residential income is dropped significantly, 70% drop in across both the county and 70% in Moscow, 69% in Latah County. So way down. And again, the previous year we saw some of that. People were investing. Some people were pulling money out of the stock market, putting it in a residential income. They were buying investment properties. It was kind of the hot thing to do. Park your cash there. Again, hedge against inflation, all of this. And, when you're talking about 30-year rates, if it's a 4 units or less, right? 30-year rates locked in and these really low rates made some sense, right? Buy investment properties. As soon as those interest rates came up, it just didn't make sense.
Right. It doesn't pencil out.
It doesn't pencil out.
If you have no cash flow whatsoever or negative cash flow, unless you're well heeled and you've got a whole bunch of things that are there to help you like supplement it, but who wants to walk into a situation with negative cash flow and saying, well, I can hold on to it and I'll get some appreciation out of it over the next 60 months. And hopefully I'll be able to, it'll eventually cash flow. Yeah. A little bit of rate increase for your rent.
Yeah.
On your property.
And that's where I think we really, that's where the rates most affected it.
Yeah,
because, somebody for their primary residence, like you were saying, Dad, it's like, you just got to make it work, right? People are going to eventually, they've got to, whether that's, adjusting their expectations or budgeting or saving more money, trying to, get that raise, whatever it is, people are going to figure out how to make it work because they need a house to live in.
Right.
But for these investment properties, investors are like, it's not going to pencil. I'm not going to buy it. Excuse me. So that was a huge drop. Commercial.
Did you have the percentage drop again? Remind us.
70%.
That's
70% drop.
That's almost unbelievable.
There were 12 sold last year compared to 30 the previous year. Commercial. This is I always caveat commercial data in the MLS because so much of commercial is done outside of the MLS. So it's really a very small piece of the puzzle, piece of the data. However, is interesting because we are at least comparing MLS commercial data from one year to another. So we are comparing apples to apples that way. Interesting that volume there, same thing, down significantly, 14% in the city of Moscow. Again, small numbers, you're talking about 6 versus 7 sold. Latah County, only 1 last year and 9 the previous year. And I actually do think that one's kind of interesting. And if we think back to 2022, there were some commercial buildings in Troy, commercial buildings in Potlatch. Some of the outlying towns had some commercial sales happen more than normal last year, back down to only 1. So huge drop there. But what about what are your thoughts on pricing? I'm cheating because I have the data in front of me, but heading back up to residential, what do you think we saw prices do this last year?
Well,
they continue to increase.
So interestingly enough, basically flat. Average sale price for residential in Moscow, essentially unchanged, changed by $900. Median sale price went up 1%. Same, and then in the county, actually down a little bit average, but median up by 3%. A little bit basically unchanged, essentially.
Yeah, I wonder if you looked at
Year
that
over year.
and you'd see if that was really skewed towards the highest end of the market. So, some house that might have sold for, gotten bid up to 700, didn't get bid up this last year to that high, so it sold at 650, where I would think, generally speaking, prices are continuing to go up.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of demand and not a lot of inventory. And so I think that's just what we have to get used to. That's the situation, and then develop strategies to address that. I think for sellers, there's a good opportunity because there's lots of buyers out there. And for buyers, it's just a matter of being ready in every way, whether it's having the cash on hand, getting all the pre-approvals, but also really knowing what you want in the market. So when you see the opportunity, you're ready to jump on it, make a competitive offer, and move forward. So, but I just think it's a basic supply and demand thing. And when the supply is very soft, prices are going to be high.
Yeah, I explain to people when I have those inevitable conversations and social interactions that, traditionally in real estate, a healthy, balanced market has a 6-month supply of, take 30 calendar days on average. A 6-month supply would be 180 homes that are active in the marketplace. And we just don't have that. We have a 1 month to 1.5 month supply on average. So to your point, when you do see something that you like, chances are there's a bunch of pent up demand. So you're still going to have to be, aware of that and be ready to move almost aggressively to try to secure that particular house, because there's just so few of them in almost every category, whether you're looking at a lower price, what we would consider a starter home, or you're looking for something in the middle of the market, or in even the luxury of the high end of the market. And I see that's where most stagnation is, on the very high end of the market. Yep. But those homes typically sit for a far longer period of time. Hence, you see averages that are, like you were saying to your point, Bill, skewed for time on the market, because there are homes that are in the luxury category that sit sometimes for over a year before there's activity on them.
It is interesting. My experience, because I still have friends and things in Michigan, you look at there and there's a lot of movement, but the movement is under 300,000. We hardly have any market like that here, Yeah. But they had so many houses built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are very affordable now. And there's a lot of them on the market. Right. And as the population ages there and that kind of thing, those things go on the market and people are buying them up either to rent them or just to buy them, new family startups and that kind of thing. But it is interesting to see how many sales there are and how quickly those houses that are, say, under 280,000, how quickly they sell.
Yeah, despite interest rates of being about the same.
Yeah, and these are not fixer-uppers. These are nice homes. They probably, remodeled kitchen and that kind of thing on a nice lot in a nice neighborhood. So, again, I think it's an inventory thing. There's lots of that inventory there. We just don't have that here. And yet this is a very popular place that people want to come to. We have a great community, wonderful town, lots of, we got good restaurants.
50 degrees in January.
Yeah. So we have a lot of things going for us. We just don't have a lot of inventory.
Right.
So,
yeah. And it would be interesting to watch this year. We were just talking about that, Eddington, south of town, there's a couple of homes going up in there. There's a few going up on Sunnyside. And then the Woodbury, Woodbury certainly is seeming like that's going to be the high end of the market, higher end of the market. And so is inventory in the real kind of the bandwidth. So I when I was looking at that, so average sale last year, just over 400,000 in Moscow. Right. And so you're talking in the 700s, Woodbury, you're significantly above that average. the closest thing I think we see to that average price is probably like the condos or twin homes that are, attached, that kind of thing.
Right.
There's still some around that average price, but it'd be interesting to see how much gets built this year and kind of how much that might alleviate a little bit of the inventory issues. But I think you're right, Kris, until we really see people letting go of their current homes, it's going to continue to be real tight.
And the high end there, north of town in Woodbury, my interested clients have been people that are coming in from out of the area. Way more. I mean, everybody here is aware of it, and it doesn't raise eyebrows. It's just like people longingly looking at that and saying kind of more like a wish list for them. But I've had like 3 or 4 potential buyers in there, and they're all out of town. And they're coming from areas like Spokane and Washington, the coastal Washington, right? The west side of Washington, that are interested in relocating. And they're primarily people that are either retired or in the middle of making those plans for retirement within the next 60 months, the next 5 years.
Yeah.
That's where the Woodbury activity that I have is coming from.
Lest any of the buyers be completely discouraged, as we talked about.
You got good news?
As we talked about earlier. At some point, people do need to sell. They can put it off so long. Eventually they say, the roof needs to be replaced and I don't want to do it, so they have to move. Or, tragically something happens, somebody breaks a hip and they have to sell and put it up. So I think that's the encouragement to me, to buyers, is you need to be looking, because, the market doesn't stop completely. It seems like it's stopped, that we're just, that there's nothing happening, but that can't continue. At some
100%,
some point along the way, the dam breaks and things move forward. But I don't think people should be thinking about, prices are going to drop way down or that kind of thing. But the availability should improve as time goes on.
The silver tsunami, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Part of that. You get people aging out of homes and that kind of thing. Article I was reading on that sounds like that's slowed a little bit. People are more kind of just making it work in their homes rather than looking to downsize in that, partly because of inventory. But you're right. I mean, the fact that we were down, what did I say, 13%, it's not like homes didn't sell last year, right? It's still a lot of houses sold, especially for our size of town. So there is activity, there is movement. But it's going to be competitive. I don't think we're going to see, we haven't anyway yet seen, the bidding wars and that kind of thing that we saw previously. I don't know that people have the stomach for it, or maybe even some of that same financial ability, but it is going to be a competitive market. That's for sure. So, but yeah, there's always activity. That's for sure.
And I think for me professionally, as far as like a lot of what I've been doing over the last, like the tail end of last year and into the first quarter of this year, is just staying in contact with people I know are looking and just checking in and finding out where their heads are at, what they're thinking about, and trying to be a resource, not the end all, but I can point them in the direction of a lender or somebody that might be able to help them gain some clarity in their quest for home ownership or for the next home that they're thinking about. And I think that's where there's some value added when you're talking to somebody as a potential buyer or somebody that's a potential seller that's looking for their next home that fits their needs more appropriately than their current home. Just try to stay in contact with people and help them as they're on this journey.
Right.
Just checking in.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think elections, you all not, don't take it wrong, but you've been around a few more of these cycles than I have. You think election year is it going to have any impact on like the housing market?
Yeah. I mean, I think two things. One is I think it brings uncertainty to the market, and anytime there's uncertainty, people aren't as apt to make a decision. They may put things off,
especially big life changing.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So they have an uncertainty, and that's where I say, I think prices are going to change. The other side of the coin is that sometimes politicians, do things to try and make things look better and that kind of thing. So maybe there'll be some encouragement to soften inventories or change regulations that make things easier and that kind of thing. So, I think it could go either way. But again, I think it tends to support the idea that inventory is still going to be a problem, because people might be less apt to step out and do something completely different because of the uncertainty of the election.
Yeah, because I really wholeheartedly believe that headlines do more to terrify than they do to inform. And people are apt to take news, if it's a positive or a negative slant, most people are going to be a little more negative and less optimistic, let's put it that way. So I think that sometimes is just one more reason in some people's mind's eyes to sit on their hands and not make a move.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what you said about uncertainty. I do feel like our industry is affected a little bit more by that kind of thing, just because it is such a significant, not only financial decision, but life decision, and it involves a ton of work. Right, moving is the worst.
Right,
and so whether it's Christmas or a really big heavy snow month, or summertime when people are going on vacations, or an election, those kinds of things that distract and make people busy and get them out or whatever, kind of keep them from being like, all right, focused, settled on here's what we're going to do. Here's this move we're going to make.
Right. And it's not just our own election, here in the United States. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world where there's uncertainty, whether it's saber rattling here or there, that sort of thing. So I think that all contributes to a situation that is not positive for the industry. But by the same token, as I say, there's always opportunities, and you just need to keep looking. And I think the other thing, that an offsetting thing to the elections or the saber rattling, the situations in the world and that kind of thing, is there's a lot of really positive things that maybe aren't getting the spotlight they should. Things like AI, that really could contribute a lot to our economy, contribute a lot to profitability and that kind of thing. Where there's a labor shortage, there may be some sort of technology that can help improve it. Technology that can be used in agriculture, other things. So I think there's a bunch of positive things that maybe get hidden because of all the news of elections and that sort of thing. But we should remember those positive things and
that's great
not
advice.
not be afraid to do things.
Yeah, be steady, right? That's part of our job, is to be, there's a lot of emotion and that kind of thing involved in housing decisions, and it's good to be steady, data driven, and just explain to people what's going on and help them make the right decision.
Because almost always headlines focus on short term, and you've got to kind of do your own homework and deep dive into things so that the headlines don't, like I said, terrify you or unsettle you, and you think more long term. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as far as housing is concerned, that's a long-term investment for most people, and they need to think in terms of that, so that my immediate need is to have a place that fits my lifestyle, that I can afford, and then know that over time, historically, where the numbers are for real estate versus other asset classifications and versus, renting long-term. And that's where I think some of the resources that people have at their hands to walk through and talk through those things are so valuable, especially lenders and the lenders' perspectives on what they can do over time. And, when it's a good idea to refinance, it helps people build confidence in the decision that they're thinking about making.
Right.
To have that kind of a view, kind of the long-term view, rather than, what's happening in the market today, what's happening in the headlines today, where is the world at today, instead of being, like you were saying, Bill, more forward thinking about some of the positive aspects of what the futures may or may not bring to us.
Right. Yep.
Good.
The other thing I think is, and this is always true, but I think particularly in times that are more difficult, high-priced homes, limited availability, other things is finding hidden value. So a house, may seem expensive, but maybe it's actually underpriced because it's a 2-bedroom house, but there you can put up one wall and a closet, and all of a sudden it's a 3-bedroom house. There's always that opportunity where the house looks really bad, but it's a diamond in the rough. And so if you find that person who's got either the skill to do it, or the brother-in-law or uncle or parent that can help fix the house up, all of a sudden there's value there. And so where a buyer might be reluctant to say, wow, this is at the very top of my price range. Well, yeah, but you do these 3 little simple things that you can do with your own, blood, sweat, and tears, and all of a sudden the house is worth 20% more because you've added a bedroom or something like that. Yeah. So I think those are always things to remember too, that there's a lot of different ways to make the market work, even when the market doesn't look like it's working.
Yeah.
Agreed. Sweat equity is underrated for the average homeowner. Especially at the starter home level or entry level, it's so underrated. And I can vouch for that because I've done that multiple times. Buy a property and invest some sweat equity over time with a very limited budget, but just kind of prioritize what I want to do when I want to do it. And the basic thing I have is time. So to be downstairs in the basement of a house working on expanding the living space over a 6-month period, say from like early January until late March, or having 4 months to dedicate to a project and taking your sweet time and your sweat equity, because who can always afford to pay the trades for every little thing? I've had the trades suggest to me, why don't you do the demolition and then we'll do the remodel, and we're going to save you all those hours of our time. Get yourself a dumpster, let it sit in your driveway, and rip out what you have to rip out, and then we'll come in and do the rest of it. And basically, in some instances, it's half the cost of a home improvement or a remodel.
Right.
So,
and today there are so many things available that Kris, you and I didn't have. Years ago when we wanted to do something, we had to drive over to the lumber yard, ask a bunch of questions, get some instructions, and or dial somebody up and ask them. Today, you just go on YouTube and you can find the answer to anything.
That's right. It's amazing.
It's true. Yeah, the DIY. Yeah, it is pretty impressive what people can do and tackle themselves, and just
now I'm
being
starting
willing
to
do
sound
it.
like an old
But
person.
it's like, yeah, part of that silver tsunami.
Can't you YouTube it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's a good word. Good. Well, any last closing thoughts?
There's a crazy old adage that the best time to buy real estate was 5 years ago. The second best time is today. And it's trite in some ways because everybody's situation is different. But I've heard another quote that I'm going to throw out there. When was it ever a bad time to own? When was it ever a bad time to own? So reach out to trusted advisors is my suggestion. Get some ideas that may or may not work for your situation, and then try to come up with a plan and then work that plan. And it's always worth it to kind of extend yourself a little bit within your comfort zone to achieve a long-term goal. It's worth it to put the effort in and to, stretch yourself.
Hey, and the Palouse is great. What a great place to live.
It is.
This is just a wonderful place. So.
It's true. It certainly doesn't hurt when it's 50 degrees in January.
Yeah, it's 50 degrees in January. And
Very good. All right. Thanks, guys.
thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next week.